Never underestimate the power of a nerd when they get laser focused. GameMasters here, and while the pre-ordering and early access of Vecna Eve of Ruin has been a fiasco, I've managed to get access. Why was this so important to me? Well, simply put, it used to be that we could walk into a game store, pick up a book, give it a good thumb through, and decide if it was any good, if it would work for our table. But many game stores have closed up, and for a lot of players, buying digital is the only option, and digital doesn't really lend that well to thumbing through before you purchase it. That said, I want to be the sharing eye that gives you a glimpse into the material so that you can decide if you'd like to dish out your hard-earned money. That said, let's jump into it. And I promise, regardless of my recent experience with the pre-ordering of this book, I'll do my best to give as an unbiased review as possible. Oh, and there will likely be spoilers, as it's going to be difficult to look this over without spilling some of the secrets within. First, let's start off with the disclaimer. It reads, "All resistance to the Lord of the Hand and Eye is futile. Any thwarting of his will or his creations is temporary, and the Undying One will eventually remove all evidence of any inferior versions of reality. There will be no mercy for your pitiful souls, which never existed." Vecna Eve of Ruin promises to take your characters on a rip-roaring adventure across the multiverse in an attempt to collect together the various pieces of the Rod of Seven Parts in order to stop the Archlich Vecna from remaking the multiverse as he sees fit. At the opening of this book, we get a very brief overview of Cass and Vecna, their history. Cass being a vampire from Vecna's past. Both shared similar outlooks in that they wanted to take over Oerth, Greyhawk. For an in-depth history, be sure to check out some of my other videos. I've covered that topic pretty heavily, but in a nutshell, Cass betrays Vecna. Vecna sends him to Ravenloft, and time passes. Eventually, Cass learns that Vecna is attempting to destroy the multiverse and decides that he kind of wants to do the same thing, only he has to stop Vecna first. What I find odd here is that it appears that Vecna and Cass's background have been retconned a bit. They're not lovers, as some have speculated, but they do bond over the destruction of Oerth. Still, I mention retcon because it's always been my understanding that Vecna met Cass after Vecna had turned into a lich, not back before when they were both still human. Now, maybe I'm a little nitpicky there. Before we jump into more details, I first need to thank these iMonger supporters, as their contributions to the channel have gone above and beyond, and I cannot thank them enough. If you'd like to support the channel by becoming a Patreon or YouTube member, I'll leave a link down in the description, and of course, I'll add your name to this ever-growing list. Giving the video a thumbs up goes a long way, and if you really like what we've got going on here, if you haven't subscribed, be sure to smack that subscribe button. That too will earn my eternal thanks. The adventure itself is broken down into 11 total chapters. The first chapter touches briefly into how to create up characters specifically for this adventure, as you're going to start off at level 10. Of course, if you already have characters around that level, you can always use them as well. Should you roll up some 10th level characters, this adventure has a D6 table of backstories, two of them actually. One of them is deeds that you have accomplished, and one being why you were in the city of Neverwinter, which is where the overall adventure starts you off at. There are no new subclasses or anything like that in this adventure. This little section covering character creation is just to get you up to speed as far as power goes, so you don't become paste in the first chapter. There's also a new, I don't want to call it a mechanic, but Vecna is the god of secrets, and as such, secrets hold power. As you adventure through, you're going to learn different secrets in different areas, and as you learn those secrets, the direct wording really sums it up best. A character can magically spend a secret like currency, revealing it to the multiverse to gain a momentary boon. You essentially whisper the secret to the wind, and you'll gain something like having advantage on insight checks and casting see invisibility without having to expend a spell slot. Chapter 1 has you cruising around Neverwinter for a bit, checking stuff out, investigating, just kind of getting used to things. But eventually you'll encounter the Cult of Vecna, and you might find yourself in Evernight, a mirror version of Neverwinter. Chapter 2 finds you magically teleported to Sigil. Sigil, we still argue about that. In the company of Illustrial Silvermoon, Tasha, and Mordenkainen. Big spoiler here, Mordenkainen has actually cast the vampire in disguise. The Mists of Ravenloft made a deal with him for who knows what purpose, probably to get Vecna back, but it gave Cass a crown called the Crown of Lies. While wearing it, it allows one to assume and mimic the identity of anyone, including their voice. Cass, wanting to stop Vecna, so that he could take over the multiverse, learned that Illustrial was also attempting to stop Vecna, but that she needed help from both Tasha and Mordenkainen. This provided Cass the perfect opportunity, but he had to be in the company of Vecna to be able to destroy him for good so that Cass could take over. Cass learned that Tasha and Illustrial were going to cast a wish spell and simply wish for Vecna to be stopped. And Cass, however, is not a spellcaster, so his portion of that kind of interfered with the wish spell, sabotaged it, and instead of stopping Vecna, it instead summons you and your party. Now, I feel like this was a heavily missed opportunity to tie in Two Stairs from the Infinite Staircase. And while that book isn't out yet, we know that a noble genie by the name of Nophus lives in that staircase, and that he can hear wishes, and can take people from one plane and deposit them into another to fulfill that wish. They essentially become a living embodiment of a wish granted, because Nophus can see how they can fulfill that wish. Except the explanation we are given here is that Cass muffled the wish spell, and that's how you arrived in Sigil. You learned that to stop Vecna, you have to have the Rod of Seven Parts, and that would be a benefit, so that becomes kind of the MacGuffin to move you from chapter to chapter. And I'm not going to go over in detail the Rod of Seven Parts here. I may do that in a future video, but I'm not terribly thrilled with the liberties that they've taken with it. I'm old school, and I remember how it was presented back in the day, so do take that with a grain of salt. And there's nothing wrong with it here and how it works, what it does. I'm just more puzzled by the visual representation, and that's me being very nitpicky. As mentioned, finding the various pieces of the rod is what moves you from chapter to chapter. We've given an overview in a previous video that was initially a leak, but it looks like it was those leaks were fairly accurate. But chapter 2 through 10 has you hopping across the multiverse, visiting places like a Craft Spelljammer ship, Eberron, Greyhawk, even hitting up Lord Soth and Krynn, and facing off with Strahd and Ravenloft. It is chapter 5 that is perhaps my favorite, as that is the one where you'll visit Strahd. Now, why I like this one. In the adventure Curse of Strahd from a few years back, we get an adventure in it called Death House. I feel that it was perfectly balanced adventure in terms of difficulty, but also in terms of puzzles to solve and role-playing opportunity. It was great for a beginning DM. That same Death House exists in this Vecna Eve of Ruin book, and it is within that house that you will find the fourth piece of the Rod of Seven Parts. Okay, while it's not an exact adventure, it's not the exact adventure found in Curse of Strahd, many things still remain, including the basement level with the two shambling mounds, as well as Rose and Thorn. Once you've moved through all the chapters and retrieved all parts of the Rod of Seven Parts, you're going to head back to Sigil, where Cass sloughs off his disguise as Mordenkainen, and a fairly wicked battle at that point kind of ensues. Cass takes the rod and flees to Pandecimos, the first layer of the plane of Pandemonium, where he plans to make a final move to stop Vecna and take his place. You'll follow him, and in a showdown of sorts, you'll learn exactly where Vecna is holed up and performing his ritual of undoing. That's the ritual that he's going to use to undo the multiverse. This all culminates in a final confrontation between you and Vecna, and I'm going to give a bit of a dramatic pause for the next spoiler. When you defeat Vecna, he is thrown down to Earth. His ritual of undoing is undone, and the multiverse is saved. All that it offers up, should you fail to stop Vecna, is that the multiverse becomes a terrible place indeed. Stopping him, and it goes on to say that he's not been destroyed, that he will regather his forces and possibly attempt it all again, but that won't be anytime soon. Honestly, the ending is a touch anticlimactic. The battle ends and we get a brief 3-paragraph conclusion. I mean, think about this for a moment. We just did an adventure that will take you from level 10 up to level 20. That's no small feat. You've hopped across the multiverse and you've defeated Vecna, the god of secrets, and the final farewell is a brief 3 paragraphs. The remainder of the contents covers Appendix A, which is a bestiary in which we get 33 monsters, many of which have appeared in previous books, but among my more favorite monsters in here is the Eyemonger. Appearing as a 12-foot asteroid, it floats in wild space, so it's a good bet that you're going to encounter one of these in the Spelljammer portion of this adventure. But the cool part about this guy, magic won't work if it swallows you, so you can't use magic to escape. It's considered to be a large aberration, has 13d10 plus 78 hit points, has a strength of 21, its dexterity is 6, constitution is 23, its intelligence is 7, wisdom is 13, and its charisma is 7. It has a challenge rating of 10. Then you have Appendix B, which covers what is called the character dossier. This is basically an overview for some key characters, NPCs that pop up during the adventure. Some are presented with stat blocks, others are not, and I've not really yet figured out a pattern as to why some don't have stat blocks included. For example, Mordenkainen. While it provides a brief historical overview, it doesn't include his stats. But it does include Lord Soth stats. All I can figure is that the NPCs that you have direct interaction with are the ones that have attached stat blocks. And one thing I do need to do is compare Lord Soth's stat blocks to how he appeared in the Dragonlance book. But I'm going to do that in a different video. The final appendix is Appendix C, Secrets Tracker. And I actually really like this because it reminds me a touch of the old tournament point system from the late 80s, early 90s. Although these don't have actual points attached to them, it just pulls at that amount, that slight feel of nostalgia, and I kind of like that. A few other things to note. I really like the artwork in this. You guys have seen some cool pieces throughout this video, but the opening of Chapter 4 is by far among my favorite pieces. Chapter 8 features a wicked ride called the Venatrix. It's a 10-foot tall, spiked tire, hellfire-powered motorcycle. Pretty intimidating looking. All in all, I see some missed opportunities. A few things that really should have been developed fuller, but two, there are some pretty crafty elements in this adventure as well. I likely won't use it section for section because honestly, I kind of have a tendency to rip pre-made adventures apart, just so that I can make them and custom tailor them to be effective for my players and at my table. But as this adventure is laid out, I don't think it'd be too terribly difficult to run it as is. It's not set up all that well for a beginner DM. There is going to be an element of jumping back and forth between this book and the standard monster manual. Even though many monsters are provided here, a lot are not. But two, it's also very much a railroad adventure. While there really isn't anything in here that puts a timed pressure on you, for example, if you wanted to run off on a side quest that the DM makes up, you could do that. There's nothing that says, oh, you can't do that because Vecna is almost done. You gotta hurry. But this is a pre-made adventure, and as such, it really does kind of funnel you from one paragraph to the next, from one chapter to the next. While Cass is disguised as Mordenkainen, it never really explains where the actual Mordenkainen is during all of this. Vecna has a challenge rating of 26. It never mentions the Netherese obelisks that have been rumored to be tied to Vecna in past books, nor any mention of the Weavers that built them. Oh, and it never explains what it was that whispered to Vecna from his lore from years upon years ago. And that's the book Vecna Eve of Ruin. All in all, it's not bad. I did my best to present it in an unbiased way, but I think that in a very near future video, I'm probably going to detail out what overall changes I'll be making to have it make more sense to my playstyle and my table. If that's something you'd be interested in seeing, be sure to subscribe, hit that thumbs up button, and talk to me down in the comments. Let me know if you're still excited about this adventure. And until next our paths cross, may you respect the loop of infinity.